said I do, I never imagined I was walking into a prison. My name is Amara, and this is the story of how the man I loved stripped me of my dignity, crushed my spirit, and betrayed me in the most unimaginable way.
Desmond and I were once a picture of love. When we got married, I gave up a thriving nursing career just to support him. His dreams, his ambitions, his ego. He said he wanted a peaceful home and a submissive wife. I believed him. I thought love meant sacrifice. But once the wedding excitement faded, so did his kindness. Slowly, he withdrew, emotionally, physically, spiritually. The house grew colder, and so did our relationship. He stopped caring. And worse, he made me feel like I was the problem. At first, the changes were small, barely noticeable. He stopped asking how my day was. Stopped laughing at my silly jokes. Our dinners, once filled with playful arguments and shared stories, became silent and cold. He no longer looked at me the same way. His eyes, once full of warmth, now carried an emptiness I couldn't name. He started coming home later than usual, smelling of strange perfume I didn't wear. Sometimes, his shirt would have long strands of hair that weren't mine. Silky, brown, foreign. I'd ask him where he had been, and he'd wave me off like a fly, accusing me of being insecure and paranoid. I thought I was losing my mind. I began checking his pockets, his phone, his face when he spoke. I was searching for signs of affection, like a beggar scavenging for leftover crumbs in a banquet he was no longer invited to. But the worst part wasn't the late nights or the lies. It was the silence. The way he walked past me in the house as if I was invisible. How he slept with his back turned to me every night. The way he avoided my touch as if my hands now burned him. I was no longer a partner. I was just furniture. Useful once, now gathering dust. He stopped funding anything that mattered to me. No airtime, no self-care, no dignity. When I asked for money to renew my nursing license, he told me to forget about such useless dreams. That I should focus on keeping the house clean and making meals he didn't even eat anymore. Sometimes, I'd hear him laughing on the phone, his voice vibrant, joyful. I would wonder, who gets to enjoy the version of him I used to know? Because it certainly wasn't me. At night, I cried in the bathroom with the tap running so he wouldn't hear. I stared into the mirror trying to recognize the woman I had become. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a ghost. A shadow of who I used to be. Still, I clung to hope. Maybe it was just a phase. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe, just maybe, he would return to me. But deep down, a whisper inside me had already begun to scream. This is not love. This is a slow, silent death. The day he told me I was going to his sister's house, there was no warning. No conversation. No care in his voice. It was a command. Cold, final, and sharp like a blade to the throat. He didn't ask me if I was okay. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't even look me in the eyes. Just one sentence that broke my spirit in half. You're not doing anything useful here. Go to Kyoma's place and help her out. At least you'll be good for something. That was the moment I realized. He didn't see me as a partner anymore. Not as his wife. Not even as a woman. I was just a task to be assigned, a burden to be managed, an object to be relocated. I stood there, frozen, still wearing the nightgown I had slept in. Wrinkled, stained from a breakfast he hadn't bothered to eat. My heart wanted to scream, but my mouth betrayed me. No words came out. Just silence. A silence that swallowed my pride whole. He dropped me off at his sister's house without even walking me to the door. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't wait to see if I'd be welcomed. He just drove off, without looking back, like he was finally unloading something heavy from his life. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't going to Kyoma's house to help. I was being discarded. What he disguised as help was actually humiliation dressed in courtesy. A punishment. A silent announcement that I was no longer worthy of being in his house. And the worst part? I obeyed. Because by then, I had been trained, emotionally, mentally, to believe that I deserved it. That being jobless made me useless. That my pain was my fault. I packed my bag in silence. 1 bag. Not 2. Because I already knew I wouldn't be gone for a short time. Something in me whispered, this is not a visit. This is exile. I stepped into Kayoma's house with a heart full of hope and fear. But what I found inside was far worse than anything I imagined. I wasn't just sent there to help. I was sent there to be broken. Kayoma's house looked elegant on the outside. Painted walls, glass windows, a polished gate. But inside, it was a different world entirely. It didn't take long for me to realize I wasn't brought here to help. I was brought here to serve. On my first day, she handed me a long list, chores written like military commands. Wash, scrub, cook, mop. There were no pleasantries, no kindness, not even a seat to rest. I was handed a broom before I was offered water. The kitchen became my prison. The floor, my judge. Every mistake was magnified, every error punished with insult. If the food was too salty, I was cursed. If it wasn't salty enough, I was accused of trying to poison her family. I scrubbed her bathroom with a toothbrush. I washed her husband's clothes with my bare hands, even when my palms began to peel and bleed. I woke before everyone else and slept long after the house had gone quiet. My eyes heavy, my soul even heavier. I wasn't allowed to sit on the couch. I wasn't allowed to eat the food I cooked. I wasn't even allowed to rest my back unless I was on my knees scrubbing. My bed? A thin, torn mat in the storeroom between old buckets and rat droppings. I slept beside cleaning supplies. The same hands I used to heal people in the hospital were now used to clean toilets and unclog drainages. The humiliation wasn't just physical. It was psychological, emotional. Daily, she reminded me that I was a charity case. That her brother had married below his level. She mocked my infertility, something Desmond never even discussed with me. She hinted that maybe I was cursed. That maybe that's why Desmond was drifting. Sometimes, her friends would come over and I'd serve them like a maid. They'd laugh loudly, talk about shopping trips, vacations, spa days, and glance at me with pitiful amusement. One even said, Kayoma, you're so kind for housing her. She's lucky. Most women like this end up in the streets. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But where would I go? Desmond never picked my calls. He never sent money. It was like I had been erased from his life. And this place was my punishment for existing. Each day chipped away at my dignity like a sculptor stripping marble. But unlike a sculpture, nothing beautiful was being made. Only emptiness. I became a ghost in that house. A tool. A shadow. I spoke less. Ate less. Slept less. And sometimes, I stared at the walls, wondering how love could rot into this kind of cruelty. And yet, I endured. Not because I was strong, but because I had nothing else. No choice. No escape. No voice. Just silence and survival. Days turned into weeks. Weeks melted into months. Still, not a single word from Desmond. At first, I told myself maybe he was busy. Maybe he was planning to come for me. Maybe this was just temporary. But as each day passed with no call, no message, no money, no visit, hope began to rot in my chest like food left out in the sun. I tried calling. His number rang. Sometimes, it went straight to voicemail. Other times, he would pick up and hang up immediately, like my voice triggered something bitter inside him. Eventually, he blocked me. On every platform. My messages stayed unread, sitting in limbo like unanswered prayers. The man I once called my husband had ghosted me like a stranger he regretted knowing. Even worse, his sister made it clear that I wasn't welcome. Not as a guest, not as family, not even as a fellow woman. She reminded me constantly that she was only helping because of her brother. That without him, I was nothing. Invisible. Forgotten. And she meant it. I wasn't allowed to make personal calls. She'd eavesdrop when I spoke to my parents and scold me for wasting her airtime. My clothes began to wear out, faded and torn from overuse, and when I asked for detergent, she told me to use ashes or sand. I started to smell like struggle, look like suffering. and feel like death. I reached out to a few friends, hoping someone would ask the right question or offer a couch to sleep on. But most of them had vanished when my wedding photos stopped trending. That's the thing about suffering. It filters your contact list down to 0. My body was there, scrubbing floors and peeling yam. But my spirit had gone somewhere far away. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere where I didn't exist at all. And in that silence, I began to grieve. Not just for the marriage I lost, but for the woman I used to be. The girl who once dreamed of opening a clinic. The nurse who once held babies and saved lives. The wife who once believed love could conquer all. I stood in the backyard one night, barefoot, staring at the stars. My palms were blistered. My knees were darkened. My stomach was hollow. The sky stretched above me, vast, silent, cold, and I realized, for the first time in my life, I was completely, utterly alone. No husband. No home. No help. Just me, and a breaking heart no one cared enough to hear. But even in that emptiness, a small voice whispered inside me. This is not how your story ends. The truth didn't come like thunder. It came slowly, like a crack in the wall. Small. Quiet. Then suddenly, everything crumbled. It was a Saturday. Kyoma had just returned from the salon, smelling of fresh braids and arrogance. She tossed her handbag on the table and barked at me to warm her leftover rice. I obeyed silently, my hands trembling from hours of scrubbing the veranda. As I reached for the microwave, her phone rang. She answered with her usual dramatic flair, but this time, her voice dropped, low, secretive. I wasn't trying to listen, but some truths demand to be heard. Yes, she's still here, she whispered, pacing the hallway. No. She has no idea. Desmond, relax. I'll handle it. Just enjoy your weekend with her. Her. That one word made my stomach twist. My ears began to ring. My breath caught in my chest. My body froze, but my mind raced. Her? Who was she? Why did Desmond sound so content in the background of my suffering? I hid behind the kitchen wall, peeking carefully. Kyoma didn't notice. She was too caught up in her little web of secrets. She thinks he's busy, Kyoma chuckled. You know Amara, so desperate to be loved, she'd swallow any excuse. Just make sure that girl doesn't get pregnant again. You can't afford another scandal. Pregnant? Again? The microwave beeped, snapping me out of my paralysis. Kyoma turned abruptly, glaring at me like a snake caught mid-slither. I quickly pretended I hadn't heard anything, placing the plate gently on the table. But my hands shook so violently, the spoon slipped and clattered to the floor. She stared at me. I stared at her. And in that moment, we both knew, I knew. Everything inside me screamed. Betrayal slammed into my chest like a speeding truck. My husband hadn't just abandoned me. He had replaced me. Replaced me like a faulty appliance, a broken chair, a tool that no longer served his purpose. And Kyoma, she wasn't just complicit. She was the architect of my exile. Suddenly, all the pieces fit. The cold silence. The forced exile. The blocked calls. The endless chores. The insults. The growing distance. He wanted me gone, so he could live his new life in peace. I walked to my small corner in the storeroom that night and sat on the floor. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too numb. My world had shifted beneath me, and I was hanging between heartbreak and rage. But as I sat there, surrounded by buckets and mops and the bitter taste of truth, I made a vow to myself. If this was the end they planned for me, they hadn't seen what I was truly made of. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not violently, but with a terrifying stillness, like a string pulled too tightly, and finally torn in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the bare mat in that musty storeroom, staring at the cracked ceiling. The bulb above flickered weakly, casting shadows on the wall like ghosts. My body was sore, but it was my heart that ached most. The kind of ache that no medicine can reach. Desmond had replaced me. And his sister, the woman who laughed with me on my wedding day, who held my hands as I walked down the aisle, had orchestrated my downfall with a smile. I felt stupid, foolish, broken. But strangely, I didn't cry. I'd cried too much already. Cried when I was sent here. Cried when I was ignored. Cried when my hopes died silently every night. But now, I felt something else. Fire. Not the destructive kind. No. This was different. This was the fire of a woman who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else, as usual. But this time, I didn't rush for the mop. I didn't touch the sponge. I didn't even boil water for Kyoma's tea. I just sat outside, under the mango tree in the compound, watching the sun rise like it owed me answers. Kyoma stormed out in her wrapper, shouting about the unwashed dishes and the dirty kitchen. Her voice cut through the air like a blade, but it no longer pierced me. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. Instead, I looked up at her, and for the first time since I arrived, I held her gaze. That shook her. She wasn't expecting resistance. I had been so obedient, so broken. But today, something in my eyes had changed. I saw it in her expression. For a brief moment, she looked afraid. I didn't speak. I just stood up, dusted off my wrapper, and walked past her. Not hurriedly, not fearfully, calm, controlled. Because something had shifted inside me. I went to my corner, packed my small nylon bag, and sat by the door. I didn't know where I was going. I had no money, no backup plan, no one waiting for me. But I knew one thing. I was done being a prisoner in someone else's house. Done being used. Done being humiliated. Kyoma tried to stop me. She screamed, threatened, mocked, said I'd be begging on the street in 2 days. But I didn't respond. Because when a woman reaches her breaking point, insults lose their power. Fear loses its grip. And freedom, no matter how uncertain, tastes better than the comfort of pain. So I walked out of that gate, barefoot, but lighter than I'd felt in months. I had nothing, but I had myself. And I was ready to rebuild from the dust.